Hey Forkers, Justin here. Before we get started, I just want to give you some updates about things. I'm traveling a whole bunch this fall, and I'd like to meet you. If you're listening to the podcast, would love to meet you in person. I will probably have some Fork Around and Find Out stickers with me, so feel free to find me. There are events in the show notes that you can look up. It is Tailscale Up, DevOps Days Portland, Edge Case in Amsterdam, TalosCon in Amsterdam, KCD UK in Edinburgh, and KubeCon NA in Salt Lake City. Again, links in the show notes. Some of them have a discount for tickets if you want to come. And again, come find me. It'd be awesome to meet up in person. I love just meeting you, anyone out there listening. It's great. We are also having a 9% sale on all of our store items thanks to, GitHub going down for losing a 9 essentially. So they lost a 9, we found it, and we're giving it back to you. So if you want anything, head over to FAFOFM/store and check out all the merch. And one last note, Autumn lost her job at Microsoft this week as we're recording. And if anyone out there is hiring for deploy engineers, maintainers, she's maintained Corletto at AWS and Azure Linux at Microsoft. She's great. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know she has a lot of experience. So please find her on LinkedIn and reach out if you have an opening at your company and you think she should apply. Would really appreciate it. For this episode, we have Dan Abermov, and we're going to talk all about App Protocol, Blue Sky's distributed social network stuff. I've been kind of bullish on it over the last couple of years because I got, a little bored or tired of ActivityPub being a little frustrating to me, like architecture-wise. So I think you'll love this episode. Again, reach out if you or have some positions open, or if you are going to any of these events. Please find us, and we will talk to you again soon. Welcome to Fork Around and Find Out, the podcast about building, running, and maintaining software and systems. Hello and welcome to Fork Around and Find Out, the show all about software maintenance, AI hacks, and being fed up with the Fediverse. I'm your host, Justin Garrison, and with me as always is Autumn Nash. How's it going, Autumn?
Great, but that joke was so bad.
I'm sorry. You know, like, it's just, it's there.
Now we're going to get Mastodon hate mail. Thanks, Justin.
Mastodon's fine, but it is something I do want to talk about today because I spent some time with Mastodon and specifically their protocol, ActivityPub, when I was first switching off of Twitter and figuring out, like, what the heck are we doing? And then Blue Sky came along and I was like, actually, I kind of like this design a little more and just the fluent, like, how it worked. I know people have opinions about those things. And so we brought Dan Abermov on the show. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming, because you've been doing a bunch of just like podcasts and blog posts and various things trying to share what App Protocol is all about, what the atmosphere is about. And so we wanted to have you on the show and just talk about what it is and how you got involved. So can you start there with what you were doing and why you started sharing all this information?
Yeah, sure. So I actually used to work at Blue Sky for a couple of years. And when I joined Blue Sky, I really was working on just the app itself. So there's like a React Native app, and I knew some React. And so I didn't really care for the protocol or really understood what it's about. And as I was working there, I learned a little bit more about it. And like in the beginning, I was thinking, well, what do they even mean by, developing a protocol? Like the protocols that I know are, things like HTTP or FTP or like SMTP, like the protocols that I've heard about. So it was kind of weird that, why would you build an internet protocol? And is that even like a real thing? Or are they just doing some kind of marketing around that? Or like, what is it? And then as I was kind of learning about it, because, when I was working on the app, I kind of started bumping into some pieces of Edproto, or like that Edproto is how they call it, like in a shorter way. I actually got pretty excited about it. And I've left Blue Sky a while ago, but I'm still, blogging about it, Prado, and I think it's very exciting. Like it's one of the most exciting kind of takes on the web that I've seen, kind of possible evolutions of the web, and so I think all attention has been, sucked out into like the AI space right now, and I actually think like at Prado really deserves a closer look from the web developer community. And so I'm just trying to get people at Prado filled, and that's why I'm doing this, this podcast tour, just trying to kind of, get people excited about it.
What was the change for you? Like, what got you excited when you started looking into it? Like,
Mm, well, I just thought it's like I got excited about like the idea itself made a lot of sense to me, and I just thought like it really has the potential to kind of save the web. That's like a big that's like a big statement, but I think we've all been feeling that there's something going wrong with the web, like over the last 10 years maybe, that like it's kind of becoming less open, it's kind of getting more fragmented into these like closed spaces where, rent seekers are just starting to like, charge rent and APIs and all of that stuff. And it just feels like it's very disconnected from this kind of open I think spirit of the web that initially, when you learn about how the web works, like it's a very kind of open thing. And so I think we've been losing some of that. And I think at Prado kind of breaches that gap between, the user experiences we actually want in our apps while kind of porting them onto the open web topology so that it actually feels like, like all these like social experiences, social apps we have, they can become a part of the open web like in a very meaningful way, and it changes the product dynamics as well. So like we can have more competitive marketplace where products don't really trap you the way like social media companies today do. So that is kind of why I'm excited about it.
I want to back up with something that you said about this being a protocol and not in the this is HTTP sort of protocol, right? Because it does build on top of what this audience might understand. Like this, a lot of our audience is like infrastructure network people that when they think protocols, they're thinking like TCP IP, right? Like these are like, how do I send something on a wire? And in this case, this is more of like a data transfer schema of how do I get data from one place to another? And that itself has gone over various evolutions of things like IMAP for email, or I actually was just talking about this last week, SOAP, the XML sort of like pre-JSON APIs, right? Like we were sending all this XML over the wire and it was called SOAP. And now like app protocol kind of fits in that layer of like how does the data transfer, not necessarily at the lower level. This is a layer 7, like app layer in the TCP stack. But what is that built on? Right, like that fundamentally has other pieces that it relies on under the hood, and I know we've made new terms such as the XRPCs and other commands that we do for PDSs, which stand for Personal Data Service. I know not everyone else is familiar with these acronyms, so I'm trying to explain them as we go. But what is App Protocol build on?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, at Prado kind of builds on top of a bunch of things that we already know. So it's HTTP, HTTPS, JSON, DNS, WebSockets. I think those are the main ones. And then there's a few like more niche things like CBOR, and there's stuff that they have to invent themselves. So that's mostly lexicon, and I think a couple of other things. But I kind of like to explain the protocol from a different perspective. So I think if you just, talk about these like different pieces, it's still like hard to understand, what is this about? So the way I kind of converged on understanding, like explaining it, is that the idea is just to upstream two different things into the web standards. So one thing we want to upstream is a notion of identity, which is kind of similar to like how you might have like a Google account that you use to sign into everything, except that it's silly that this is tied to one company. So what if we had like a notion of like almost like web accounts, like upstreamed into the web standards? And then the second idea is just that what if we gave every web user kind of a folder? So if you had a folder, kind of like a Dropbox folder, where apps can put stuff into your folder and they can kind of subscribe to updates from everybody's folders. And this is really, I think, like largely all of these like other things, they're really in service of these two ideas. So let's give everybody ability to create identities, and then let's, have some kind of place where apps can put pieces of JSON for those identities.
And that's when you're talking about the lexicons, right? Like lexicons are basically the types of files they would put in folders, where someone's going to send me a blog post, it's going to be in the standard sites lexicon. If they're sending me likes or something from my post on Blue Sky, it's going to be different versus like images or videos, right? Like those are all the lexicons kind of going, I guess those would be like folders inside the folder necessarily, right? Like is that how you would explain that side of it?
Well, I think the idea is that we want to usually like when you, for example, if you post a tweet on twitter.com, that tweet goes into twitter.com's database, right? So it's kind of like inside this closed thing that you really don't have any like real access to. The only way you can read it is through Twitter's API. If Twitter closes the API, then you would not be able to get the data from there. You can't run queries on the database, right? Like it's because it's not yours, it's twitter.com's, it's like in their data centers. So in the sense, like even if we create something publicly, it kind of still goes into these like silos that are inaccessible to the, that are not on the open web. And then with that Prado, the idea is that let's just lift all the public data out of the apps and into the open web itself. So there is like a folder somewhere, kind of like a Git repository that is open, that anyone can query and access and aggregate from. And that is where your JSON goes. And then like twitter.com is just one consumer of that folder that like aggregates stuff from everybody's folders. And so Twitter's database would become kind of like an index or like a cache of the entire network. And so if, then the problem becomes, well, how do you store if you have a folder with like all the different applications data that is, public data from all the different applications that are yours, right? So maybe like if Reddit used that product, there would be like a subfolder in your folder that's like all your Reddit posts or like all your Reddit comments. Or if Stack Overflow was on a Prado, then there would be like a Stack Overflow subfolder in your folder that has all your questions, all your answers, all your votes, right? And then the question becomes, okay, but like if we put everything, like all the applications data into your folder, how do we actually, like how do we decide their structure? And so the way Prado solves this is it's actually like up to the applications to decide. So nobody needs to agree on like a single notion of what a comment is or what a post is. It's kind of per app. And so in like my Prado folder, there would be, all Blue Sky follows. They're in the format that Blue Sky app decided like what a follow is, or like all Blue Sky likes, or all Reddit comments, right? Like all of these things are kind of like data types. And so you could okay, then now the question is like, how does an app specify data types? And so one way to do that is with, something like TypeScript interfaces, right? Like that's, or like JSON schema or something like this. And so with Prado uses its own format that is kind of like a JSON schema that is called lexicon that can be compiled to different, TypeScript definitions or Rust definitions or like to any language together with some runtime parsing helpers that give you strongly typed objects. So lexicon is kind of like a JSON schema format for, defining schemas that can be converted to TypeScript interfaces or whatever that let you parse things out of users' folders to, whatever format that your application actually needs, and you choose that format when you design the applications.
I get really excited about App Protocol because I think we've all spent so much time investing in building communities, and then that community gets sold or it changes and you lose so much time. So it's really cool to think of the idea. I mean, like, Instagram was great and then it got sold to Facebook. Facebook changed. Twitter got sold. So what do you think is holding App Protocol back, I guess? Because it seems like, to me, it makes a lot of sense. And it seems like it got really popular when Blue Skies first started expanding. What do you think is stopping it from being like fully like the next Twitter, or the investment in the amount of people that maybe Twitter or Instagram or Facebook has? What do you think is stopping it from getting to that level right now?
Yeah, I think it's multiple things. I think one is just that, well, a lot of people don't know about it, right? And it's kind of cutting in both directions. It's for, like a lot of web developers have no idea that it exists. So there's a part of, why would I use it for my, social app? Like if you're making a social app, or even some app with like identity, right? Like where you offer users to log in and then they create something there. Just not being aware that this is a thing, that there's this atmosphere, which is, kind of like blogosphere, but for like all the applications that are using at Prado. So just not being aware of this movement. I think right now it's kind of like a idealistic movement maybe, because just like open source was in the 90s, right? Like if you're a developer and you need to kind of buy into it to use it, right? Because it requires some amount of effort to actually like architect your application this way. So I think part of it is just like people not being aware of it. A large part is consumers not being aware of it because it is kind of like the explanations are kind of technical, and I think I think there are surface level explanations that are actually quite understandable, such as, what if all your apps wrote to something like a Dropbox folder, and then they wouldn't be able to trap you and your communities, right? Like this is something that maybe can resonate, but ultimately I think it has to win by having better products. So it's all like we need developers to start adopting it um, for it to grow and for successful products. There are some products that are getting, I guess, like somewhat popular. There's this Tangled, which is like at Prado GitHub, and there's Leaflet, which is like at Prado Blogin. There's actually like a couple of those platforms now. So I think it's the thing that's stopping it is primarily just more products becoming successful using at Prado under the hood. I think part of the curse of at Prado is that it's actually designed to be invisible. So it's not designed to be this weird decentralized thing. It's kind of more like under the hood, your product just becomes, much more interoperable with other products that use at Prado. But like as a user, you don't necessarily even notice some of that until you see that like different apps can kind of show content from each other or like riff on each other's data in some way. So
Which is
yeah,
something like I feel like we've
yeah.
been doing that for a long time, right? Like that idea of I want to pull content from somewhere else into like my blog. I remember back in the day I had a WordPress blog and I put like a plugin that would show my tweets on the sidebar, right? Like it was just a way to like mix and say, this is what I'm doing, this is where I blog, but also here's me on social media and here's me on YouTube. And you try to do that already. We've been doing that for a very long time with mixing those things, but they were all different systems. And you always were like, well, I have access to that API for now. If someone removes it, I can't do that anymore. And I don't think that's new, but I think that combining that into who you are as like, here's your, again, a personal data server is like just your stuff. Like, here's all your stuff. Here's all your interactions on the internet, at least in this like social vein. One of the things that I think to make people care, or at least make people understand, is like most of the things you described, I think we could also have built on top of ActivityPub, right? As far as just like ways it interacts, I think that the fundamental instances in ActivityPub and Mastodon is a very different thing than a PDS. How do you describe those differences?
I almost feel like it's also like if the things we wish RSS feed could have like grown into, or like if RSS feed and ActivityPub had like a baby.
Well, yeah, and I mean, ActivityPub is basically just RSS feeds, right? It's just like a one way with like some webhooks, and App Protocol is a lot of the same stuff. I usually describe both of them as like an interactive RSS. It's just like it's Web 2 for RSS.
What was the question again?
How do you describe the differences between App Proto
Yeah.
and ActivityPub?
Yeah, I actually like the RSS comparison a lot more, and maybe because ActivityPub is, it doesn't really specify what you do with it. It's kind of like, there's a mailbox, and like what is the actual architecture that you want to make it? Like it doesn't really say, like it doesn't prescribe or even like suggest any specific architecture. And so when we talk about ActivityPub, like I think in practice we often end up talking about Mastodon, which is, the most popular kind of ActivityPub thing. But then if you criticize it, then people say, "Oh, it's just because Mastodon is doing it wrong." But it's like, well, I'm just gonna kind of collapse these two concepts into, maybe like Fediverse or Mastodon, whatever we want to call it. But I think the big difference is, like to me, like Mastodon world is kind of like, you want to decentralize, take something like Twitter, right? Like you kind of want to decentralize or like give more power to the people. And so what they do is, okay, let's make it hosted, right? Like let's make it a piece of software you can run yourself, like WordPress, right? You just push it to your hosting and it's a server and you can log into it or register there, and it's like it has its own database. It's like a small thing that's like completely isolated. And so, like, Mastodon's solution to giving power to the people is, let's just have 1,000 Twitter copies. Like, let's host 1,000 or like 10,000 or I don't know, 100,000 of mini Twitter apps. Everybody runs their own app with its own database, and then let's somehow try to bridge them. And so in Mastodon world, you can, like normally you log into like you have to pick a server, right? Like you have to pick which of these because it's completely unrelated apps, right? Like they have nothing to do with each other. It's literally copies of the same thing that like independently hosted. And so you have to pick like which one you want to register on. And then they have these like mechanisms to talk to each other because they have to somehow give an illusion of a shared network. So if I want to follow somebody, but they're not on this instance, these like servers have to talk to each other and tell each other, okay, like I want you to kind of email, like I think of it almost like email, like ActivityPub, like just like email me all posts that this person is posting so that I can ingest them and like also display them. And so it's kind of like many to many where all instances potentially have to talk to each other, but each of them is like a completely separate world, and they're trying to somehow like bridge those gaps. And that is kind of how like it's almost like a very like feudal system. Like I kind of imagine it as maybe fiefdoms in ancient China is my mental models with like horses running between those nodes with like messages, and then if two admins decide to have a beef, then you're not going to be able to like follow, or like you maybe follow a friend from another instance, but this instance stops talking to your instance, you can't do anything with it, like about it. Or if your instance goes down with your account, like your literal ID was you at that instance, right? Like you kind of belong to that clan or, to that specific thing. So it's like it's a very kind of, I think of it as like very kind of disconnected shape. And at Prado, I think is much more like RSS, and like the analogy I like to draw is like RSS and Google Reader, where the source of truth is like everybody has a hosting, whether they know it or not. Or like when you register, just like you register with Google, like they're gonna host your data. Like it's kind of similar. Like you register on your first Prado app, it's gonna host your data. But actually, like hosting is disconnected from apps. Like hosting is app agnostic. It's just a folder, and like you can move that folder who hosts it. And so it's kind of like these two layers are completely disconnected. I can change where my folder with JSON lives. I can change the provider if I want to, and I can access all my stuff through any app because all apps are aggregating from every hosting. So it's kind of just like a different shape where your identity is not tied, it doesn't matter kind of where it's hosted initially because you can always change it, and that like you don't lose any of your followers or any of your data or like any of those things because they're just in your folder. Like you can always back it up.
And I think that universal ID is the anchor point there, right? Because like you have to solve identity first, and a lot of people in the infrastructure space are always like worried about lock-in at certain layers of the stack, and I've always said that like identity is the biggest lock-in you can have, right? Like as soon as you tie your identity to Active Directory or AWS IAM or something like that, like you're locked. Like that's it. Like you're not moving that thing. And your point there of like if I lose access to Gmail, right? Like I've lost my Gmail account forever because that's tied to Gmail's server and I don't have any portability of that portion of it. But if for like RSS feeds, like I've kept my Google Reader RSS feeds, like I've moved multiple times to different providers by like exporting my OPML, list of crawl all these RSS feeds, and I just go to another app and I don't even care because all the data is coming from somewhere else and I can just aggregate it one layer above that and I can continue using that no matter where I want because it's just a standard open protocol. One of my biggest questions about Blue Sky and App Proto in general is this original promise that I was kind of sold on when I was first like, okay, forget, I'm not doing Mastodon. I mean, for me, Mastodon, like I was really trying to like it. I was trying to simplify it, and I think that disconnect of like an instance is an active piece of software that owns everything was really hard for me because I was like, I have to run an instance of one for one, and it had to do more complex things than a PDS had to do. And so that really was hard for me. But the also Mastodon in general, ActivityPub is a standard. It can exist outside of Mastodon, but like Mastodon in general had no business model originally, 2-3 years ago especially, and everyone was like, how are you going to fund this? Like volunteers and donations doesn't fund
it's also a very expensive process.
Yeah, they don't like. Yeah, the actual people that were running this at larger scales, like we had people on ShipIt, right, that were running the Hachyderm, and Hachyderm was costing a lot of money, but actually the main thing that was a problem was like the legal demands of if one of your users has CSAM, or even if you peer with a other Mastodon instance that is doing that, you're going to be caching that information, and now that is on your server, and now that is a problem for you legally in a lot of places. And I was like, oh, that's a big problem, and that's something that in the app proto case doesn't exist, because like my PDS doesn't talk to your PDS directly. We all get funneled up to the application layer.
I also think there's another layer of being approachable, right? Like for one, like you have to make a lot of decisions for Mastodon before really getting to use it and understand it. Like, how do you know what server you want to pick? Like, I feel like a lot of it requires a lot of knowledge that you may not have had previously. Also, I think like a lot of people that are engineers like Mastodon, but it can be intimidating for other people. I think Blue Sky gives you the option. Like, it's kind of like Linux or like other places that like some developers want to be really into the weeds and they want to pick every single like configuration, and some people just want to use it, right? And I think Blue Sky gives you both of those. You can get as like into it as you want, into the whole protocol, or you can use it like other social media apps where it's not super complicated and your like level of complication or involvement can either expand or stay the same, but it's very approachable in my mind compared to the opposite.
And as a developer, like I vibe coded a couple sites just for myself that only interacted with Blue Sky for the identity piece. Like, I don't do any of the lexicon PDS storage. Like, none of that's there. It's literally just like, let me log into this app. It's just, at that point, it's just a single sign-on that like Google was providing me before, right? It's like, hey, I just need an identity that I can trust, and I don't have to build all that into the app directly.
The protocol has made me more excited about RSS feeds and like the internet, because I think like there's so many people who invested years into like Twitter, and I don't mean just like to have a fancy following, but I mean like the community. Like, I met so many people and friends from Twitter, and you invest a lot of time into like, making videos for either YouTube or TikTok, or like building a community on Twitter, and then it's all just gone. So I think that it's almost like revived a lot of the excitement about social media and the web and interacting with people.
And that's my biggest question here, is the promise I was provided when we were moving from Mastodon into Blue Sky was like, this is what they call it, billionaire proof or whatever. Like, no one can buy this thing because it's not one thing. Anyone can fork this and like just consume the fire hose and like build another one. Dan, do you think that's real? Do you think that's actually the case?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
I know it is. That's why I'm asking you.
I think it's like it gives us the tools to, reduce the, like, obviously like Blue Sky is the biggest app, right? But what they're trying to do is like they're upstreaming as much as they can into like the standards, right? Like, so there's IETF working group for at Prado is currently focused on, I think, like two kind of core pieces, like the repository structure and something else. I don't remember exactly, but basically the goal is to upstream as much as possible, so that even if Blue Sky eventually turns like against the Prado, other companies can keep it running, or like other people can keep it running. Relays have gotten like running a relay has gotten much more like accessible, because it used to cost a lot of money. Now it costs like $30 a month with the current volume, I believe. So some people are like running stuff on Raspberry Pis and so on. So I think, like, broadly speaking, I think it is true. I think there is still, of course, like Blue Sky as a company that is kind of behind the protocol has a lot of weight, right? So it's, if it's going to try to snuff it out, I think that would be bad for the community, right? Or if they try to like do something bad with it. But I think like all the tools that we want are there. Like, all the important code is open source, of things are getting upstreamed into standards. So it's really a question of like, what do we want to do with it, and are we building something with it, or are we just criticizing?
And how does that, like, anytime there's free information on the internet, it gets abused, right? And I think that is something that all these, like, one of the selling points of having a PDS or app protocol in general is just the fact that you can, all of your data is there, anyone can crawl it anytime they want. They can go discover all the PDSs and then just start crawling all the data. And that's right now fine, because it's still a relatively small network with relatively small amounts of data. But I guarantee you all of the like AI crawlers are just sucking up that data, right? If it's free data on the internet, they're gonna consume it. And whether that's from the fire hose or directly from the PDSs. I know there was a thing last year where it's like AI training was happening, right? And it's like, hey, like, this wasn't authorized by Blue Sky. Like, this was just something that like they started doing, and they started sucking up the data. So now what? How do we protect that long term? because that's the maintenance side of it that is the hardest problem. Once you put anything for free on the internet, it's going to be widely abused.
Well, I think it's, and maybe, maybe that's just uncomfortable for people. Like, I don't know, but I think Prado kind of takes like a very, maybe like a very direct stance there, which is this is a thing for efficiently disseminating public data, and it tries to level the playing field by making it equally accessible to everyone. And so it's kind of like, like for me, like my personal, like take on it is, when I'm posting on Stack Overflow, for example, that used to be a thing, right? When I was posting on Stack Overflow, like my goal is to contribute to kind of humanity's knowledge, right, on this topic. My goal is not to contribute to Stack Overflow's ability to monetize on this or whatever. Or like when I post on Twitter, like it's really more like I think of it like I'm putting a public thing out there. Twitter is just the medium through which it is accessed. I'm not like contributing IP to Twitter's, worth as a company or something like this.
But you are. I mean, in every social network that makes money off of the content of its people, you're working for free.
Right,
And
but
that
I
was
mean,
the
like
thing
in
for
terms
me.
of intent, like it's not what I'm intending to do. It's just like it just happens as a byproduct of me, using this app. But my point is just like I think with Ed Prado, the idea is just that no, like if we're putting things in public anyway, let's just make them fully public, just like websites are public, right? Like when you put stuff on your website, there is no question of like who's accessing your website or like not, unless they're like costing you a lot of money with
Well, then
like trolling
that's the
and so
problem
on.
right now, right? Is like I literally do see like the AI crawl bots come to my website, and thankfully, like my hosting has a generous free tier, and so it's not
Yeah.
costing me money right now. But I can absolutely see that it would cost me money at some
Yeah, but
points, and then I'm like,
that's a completely different problem,
But I
though.
see what Dan
It's
is
not
saying. He's
what we're
saying that that's
discussing.
not his intent, right? Like, that's not why he did it. And, like, to a certain extent, you only have so much control over what people are maliciously going to do. And I think that that's going to continue to evolve. You know what I mean? If you told us 5 years ago we were going to have to fight bots to the point of it costing people as much money as it does, like, I think people would be like, like, I think that it's going to continue to evolve.
everyone has the agency to like spend their time wherever they want, and that's the thing that like for me was like when Elon bought Twitter, I was like, I read his biography like a decade ago, and I was like, I will never work for that man. He is an idiot and a narcissist, and I do not want anything to do with him. And once he bought Twitter, I was like, oh, if I stay here, I'm working for him for free, and I'm never doing that. And so that's when I closed my account. I'm like, forget it. Like I don't even care where this is going. Day one, I'm like, I'm out.
Do you think at some possibility at some point we'll be able to block like certain websites that maybe take app protocol, but we say we don't want to contribute to them? Do you think at some point we'll get to there where it'll be?
Yeah. So that is kind of I think, like the idea is that it's similar to personal websites, I think, except it's like your JSON. So in that sense, like on a fundamental network layer, the idea is like everybody is a scraper, even like the first party app, like you're posting on Blue Sky, but actually the Blue Sky app puts JSON in your folder and consumes it. So a Blue Sky app is just another scraper. And so that puts everybody on equal footing. But then, of course, there is questions. Yeah, like, do I want that to be indexed? How do I express intent? Like, maybe I don't want to. Like, I just want to separate this thing about AI is hammering my website and like I'm paying a lot of costs. Like, that is a completely different problem from I don't want my content to be like scraped by AI because I don't want it to, be represented in the training. That is like two different concerns. And I'm saying like that for the second concern, for like I don't want to be in the training data, the solution there is I think similar to robots.txt. So we develop, we agree on some kind of standard for declaring, do you want to be, do you want the content to be digested by AI? And then it's then it moves into like, do crawlers respect that? Is there legislation that forces them to respect that? And so on. So it kind of moves into, like one layer below. But yes, you can't really, you can't kind of block it on a technical layer unless, again, it's done similar to how like Cloudflare tries to detect like AI traffic or, exclusions based on user agent and so on. So I think it's very similar to how it works on the web in general.
And one of the things that we found that I think has changed in the last probably 5 years is the like robots.txt is is just like a convention, right? It's like, hey, we please don't do this, right? Like it's not an actual hard block of like, you are not allowed to do this. Like, yeah, like all the stuff in the CGI bin, like don't go there, please. And some of that was to like make your discovery a little better, but a lot of it was just to like, I don't want you in this spot. And it was generally honored by scrapers and crawlers that were doing it for search indexing. And I don't think that holds true anymore. We need legal precedents that is like going to get people in trouble if they do that, or we need to have harder blocks on the you are denied from this, in that like my PDS is hosted on a, like a $5 a month, VPC somewhere. And I'm just like, oh, it's like, it just runs. But if like it started getting hammered, like it would go down. I would get DDoSed or something. Like I would consume a bunch of network if people like found it and were like hammering it, which is a valid concern of self-hosting in 2026. But like I need to have some other way to, like, I don't want to set up like IP tables to like start blocking this stuff, right? Like that's the opposite direction of where we want people to have to go with this. And I know like if you're on Blue Sky's network, great, like you're getting a free PDS and you're, being hosted by them. But say Larry Ellison decides that he wants to spend $1 billion and come buy Blue Sky, like $1 billion is a lot of money. I bet someone's going to say yes to that. And now Larry owns all the PDSs. So now what do we have to do? And everyone's like, well, you have to go self-host your PDS. And there's some great migration tools out there, but it's not completely, bulletproof from this happening.
Well, I think part of the question is like, why is it bad if Larry Ellison, like if the PJS contract is respected, a PJS is just a neutral app agnostic storage. It's like owning, I don't know, GoDaddy. Like, okay, maybe GoDaddy is not a great company, but it's not really changing what's on your website, right? So I think part of the point of it, Prado, is it actually doesn't matter, because if there's enough incentives to not break the network, because otherwise, all kinds of shit breaks, and to preserve its shape actually kind of, like it adds a bunch of new constraints that you don't really benefit from. Like you can control the app layer, but then somebody can make another app. You can control the hosting layer, but if you do shady things, people can just swap to another hosting.
But GoDaddy can take down my website, right? Like as the hosting provider, if I'm hosting stuff that's against their terms of service, then they take it down, right? And that's, I think, one of the problems we've had when we look at these buyouts, right? Like the problem with Twitter was that the terms of service changed. Like all of a sudden, things that we were doing a while ago, like are like, oh, you're going to get blocked or banned or whatever. The terms have changed because of the ownership, and people that don't own their PDS will just as easily get taken down as you would at GoDaddy.
Sort of, with a couple of corrections. I think one correction is just, yes, GoDaddy can take it down, but then you can, if you have a backup of your site, right? Like if you just regularly back it up, you can put it somewhere else, right? You can put it somewhere else. You can point the domain at that other server, and it's not going to break any links. So your site is kind of back on the web, if somebody else is happy to host it. So GoDaddy doesn't really have the same kind of power that, like, if Twitter takes it down, like, you're gone. You can't like reappear somewhere else, right? That you're like completely gone. So I think that is one difference. Another difference is just like, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to take, like, why, if you buy the app, you just ban people on the app level. Like, I don't know that it's that useful to ban people at the hosting layer.
And there's plenty of reasons, I think, to ban at the hosting layer, right? Like if they don't want it there, if they want to really exclude people. But I want to go back to that, like, you could just move your stuff and have a backup, because at the very bottom level of identity in app protocol is essentially a certificate, right? Like a cert that is a private key that signs all of my posts. I can't get that out of Blue Sky, but I can, right? But I can create a second one and say, trust this one too. Is that right?
But you get to take all your stuff with it, right?
I mean, but like it can be too late, right? Like if Larry comes in, buys it, if you have your PDS there, it's gone. Like, it's too late now. You should have been backing up before, right? That has happened in, like, I see plenty of people like Google accounts and GCP and stuff like that. Like, oh, look, Google shut down my account. Like, all of my website's down. Like, it's gone because they hosted my stuff. Technically, it's all Docker containers or all VM images, or I have all the code, but like, I can't just move that somewhere because I need to change DNS and I need to do a bunch of work to get there. And I think that at Proto and Blue Sky have the same problem. Of yes, maybe the data can be portable, but you can't just go create it somewhere else necessarily. And if I go create a new PDS with my alternate key and import all my data, like, Blue Sky doesn't have to crawl me. It's like, no, you don't exist anymore. Like you can, like, it's even worse than shadow ban, right? Like you cannot be in this protocol layer.
I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean. I mean, it's also, I think we're kind of starting with this premise that this is a protocol to be unbannable. I don't think that is the premise, because every app needs to be able to block its users. That's just, that's just like how
Mm-hmm.
apps work. Like as a developer, you want to be able to ban any person. So, or like as a hosting provider, you also want to be able to like arbitrarily suspend people, right? Like, this is just part of how these things are supposed to work. So I don't think like this premise that the protocol is supposed to be resistant to that is quite true. But I still like I think with the case of if your hosting is actually hostile, what you can do is you can register a rotational key with the identity registry. And then if you don't trust your hosting, and then if your hosting tries to do something, you can override it with a rotational key, and you can point to another hosting. So you don't need your hosting's permission to actually swap it out. I think
Mm-hmm.
that is like one difference.
And I guess that's something that I would love to see Blue Sky do by default, and
Yeah,
say,
but
hey,
yeah, totally.
you signed up for an account, we're going to own your identity, but here, go generate a passkey and you own that. And if you
Yeah,
ever need
yeah.
to create a new identity or whatever, like we're going to trust the passkey first or something, just to get, like, if you have a password manager, trust it on your device, whatever it is. Like I would love to see that as default in Blue Sky, to really say like, hey, we want you to trust us and we're going to trust you. And maybe we can't get the passkey back, but like we have your identity for the first certificates, and this is your PDS that you can own here. But yeah, if you will need to go run another PDS somewhere, you can use that passkey to like bootstrap it and say also trust this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I wanted. I think like I want. It's a tricky problem because you're also giving people like a way to, get scammed. Like if you're giving out like private key material to
Yeah,
users,
that's
like
true.
they're probably gonna get scammed. So it's a balance, but I think like there's these things like like secure chips and whatever where like it's you can't really like pull it out easily. But I think like if Blue Sky hosting did backups by default, like I think that would have been great. Like if it would even like to actually to just do my phone, right? Like if my phone had my like a rotational key that overrides Blue Sky's one, the one that's on my hosting, and it made like regular backups, I think that would have been, that would have made the network a lot more resilient.
Yeah, and I do think that like even my PDS, like I went through and I uploaded a bunch of my short videos when Blue Sky launched minute videos, and I was like, oh cool, I have a bunch of these, let me just upload them and see what happens to my PDS. And like it did, blobs aren't even stored there, so like blobs are still an external thing. So I'm like, oh, these are just all the JSON, right? Like this is nothing. It's like a few megs of information, and it's super easy to actually back that up around and keep a copy of it, as long as you can keep the
Hmm.
key secure, and then you still have access to the blobs, which is something that I think, again, be nice to have like some way to back it up on Blue Sky as well. I think it's like S3 under the hood, but that's the data that people really care about. And the
Hmm.
thing that Mastodon fails at is this universal identity. And I know they're working on it, but I don't, as far as I know, no one's implemented it. It's not there yet. But like fundamentally, Blue Sky was saying, okay, we're gonna start with identity and who you are, which is one of my first like big Blue Sky videos, I guess, was like how to set up the whole like DNS identity of like, oh look, your website is
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
And in that PLC, the DID can point to a DNS entry, and that was fascinating. But also, I realized like how many people that locked out of like
Hmm.
name squatting and stuff like that. Like it's really cool that I can just reuse justingarrison.com, but it sucks that like anyone that never bought a domain, like that they just get whatever username they can grab.
I almost think this is like everybody keeps talking about like the bubble and how everybody's doing the same thing, and like app protocol to me is exciting because I think that we have a, like with just everything going on in the world and people talking about data sovereignty and like the distrust of all the billionaires with like social media, it's almost like people are going to be looking more and more for new options, and I think it's going to open up a realm of like businesses and tools and startups to start to address these issues, and maybe or hopefully like new like open source projects and just different like I think isn't there like a Black Sky too,
Hmm.
and like a bunch of other
There's a
social
Euro
media.
Sky, there's
You
Black
know what I mean?
Sky,
Like I
there's
think
yeah, there's
it's
a bunch of those.
at least it's like a foundation of something that we can start doing differently and not having to completely start again. Like, do you remember when people were copying their Twitter tweets that were their, like, you know, what they felt were their best Twitter tweets and then just like mass posting on Blue Sky? Like, I feel like even where we are right now is better than that.
And I look back at, like, from the early teens, right? This I forget what the lawsuit was, but like big providers had to allow an export functionality of your data, right? And that's why like Facebook and Twitter and Google and they all have like take out or export your data. I did that for LinkedIn, right? There was a new LinkedIn built on AppProto, and it's like, go to LinkedIn, request your backup, and then we just import it, and it doesn't do everything, but it'll get like your jobs and that sort of stuff. And I'm like, that's really cool, because even if it's not in one place already, I can consume some of that LinkedIn information and export it and then put it in a place that I do control and I do own a little bit more.
Okay, I have a question for both of you though. Did you see the new LinkedIn like report AI slop like button?
Well, I mean, they should have just made the slop button the default button. They should have report, this is not slop, right?
Okay, but what do you think about it? Like, of all
it's not enough. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, everything on LinkedIn is slop. Like,
do you really
is it real? Like, I haven't seen
yeah.
it.
So you can actually go to like the post, like, you know how you have the three little dots at the top of a post,
Yeah.
and actually like do like, this is AI slop. And I just think it's interesting because it just shows like how much all of this is evolving. You know, like there's been like, think about if you look at like how we used AIM and like RSS feeds and chat rooms, and then you think about how it grew into like MySpace and Facebook, and like we're still kind of like, I feel like we're even in a almost a more aggressive like cycle of like change and like dissatisfaction, but like looking for the next thing, you know. And AI has made that more like complicated, like knowing what you see and read is real, or being like just the fatigue of so much of it. Like, I just think it's interesting that that's where we're at, that is a button now, you know.
I guess that brings me to like an integration that AppProto has that I think is not well. It was advertised a lot initially, and it's not well utilized today. Is labelers, and that's essentially what you're doing on this LinkedIn, right? It's like manual labeling to say like, hey, this sucks, right? Like, I'd get this out of here. And Dan, do you subscribe to any labelers?
I think I used to, like, not anymore. I kind of think, like, from the product perspective, they feel very bolted on. So maybe if they redesign it a little bit.
The few that I still like are, there's one for like Twitter screenshots, right? Like, hey, we labeled this as a Twitter screenshot, so we just like hide the image for you. And that's like a default that like I subscribe to the labeler, so now all those images are hidden for me by default. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, a lot of times it sucks because it mislabels things, but I can like say, hey, this isn't labeled correctly. This isn't a Twitter screenshots. Let this one through. And so I feel like that was a cool thing for like 3 months that people were trying to run these labelers and figure them out and say like, oh, how would this actually work? Be able to label AI slop immediately.
I thought the concept was interesting, but what really resonated with me with labeling was opinions, right? Like, it was very opinion heavy. And I felt like people did nothing but argue whether something was racist or whatever, and it became more about like it being a way to like, I don't even know. Like, it just, people were fighting more of the opinions of the labels than the actual like using labeling. And then I feel like nobody just talked about it anymore, and it just went away.
Yeah, I feel like it just faded away. And it was something that I think would be a really, there may be a AI slop labeler that I don't know about, but that would be interesting to say like, hey, this is
the fun labels too. Like when Barry put beans all over everything, like we haven't had a good health thread. Like, the world is so,
they need to like unbreak health thread so that health thread can be a thing again.
I feel like it's like the internet's like so serious right now, and like it is serious, and a lot of it like we need to like pay attention to things, but like the whimsy of the internet is like really lacking at the moment.
And that's still my fundamental thesis of like social media online is like people gravitate to where people are having fun. And if you're not having fun, like no one wants to be there. And just being able to like show people you're having fun on the internet is like a big thesis for just like getting people to join something. And Blue Sky has been the most fun for me, I'd say, over the last couple years.
Also the community though, and I'm not investing a bunch of time into something else that is like getting acquired in 5 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, and the thing that every social media sells is their moderation, right? Like the moderation is the key.
And that was a huge difference between Mastodon and Blue Sky. Like Mastodon got really like dark for a minute there, and Blue Sky was so much better at it. And even if maybe like they weren't pros at it. I think it was easier to sort through, in my opinion.
It at least had a moderation policy. Like every instance of Mastodon is like volunteers
And that's not
might.
a knock on Mastodon. Like, it's not like, I don't think they technically did anything wrong. I just think that, like, humans are not always well behaved, and it's a lot to try to, like, how do you police another person's server? You know what I mean? Like, then they had, like, a lot of times they were blocking whole servers, and it just wasn't set up for
I mean, because that's
it.
the only lever they had, right? The lever was ban the server.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like it was great if everybody behaved, but once you, like, it's like a lot of things, like, kind of, I think of what Dan was saying, like, these, you have to think about the feature, and then you have to think about how the feature is going to be used wrong, right? So, like, a lot of ways that you don't want to be blocked on something, sometimes there's people that you have to block, you know what I mean? And I think Twitter teaches us, like, what happens when, like, people need to be blocked. So you don't want to make it where it's completely impossible to block people, but you also want people to be able to take their data and not start all over again. It's complex because there's humans involved.
I try to think of that, like, that bring your data with you. Like things I've had in the past that I've lost data from, right? Like I had my very first blog it was WordPress and got hacked, and I had I could back up the files and I backed up the database, but I never trusted restoring it because it was hacked, and I was like, I don't know if it's going to come back. And so it eventually just like pulled out some of the posts that I liked and like rewrote them in the new platform. And over time that taught me to like run things that can't get hacked, kind of. And the only things that exist on the internet that I know of that can't get hacked are read only, and they're like static file sites, right? It's just like, hey, there's nothing that you can send here. Like everything is client side, and this is just a bunch of static files. And it's been one of the things that, it was one of the first things that I tried to do with Mastodon, where I said, can I run this as a static site or not? Can I run an instance that's static? And I got it down to like, kind of, I could make 3 files that like appeared to be 3 JSON files that appeared to be a Mastodon instance. And I can't do that with Blue Sky. And one of my worries is that there's going to be some vulnerability in a PDS somewhere that is going to let someone impersonate me, take over my account, add data they shouldn't be able to, whatever. And it's not just a worry for me, but for anyone that's self-hosting PDSs, right? And then like all these instances are exposed, just like WordPress, and like maybe 80% of them patch right away, but then the last 20% just become hacked, and they always exist because they never update them, and they eventually go away because like people don't want to deal with it. How do we, like, that's the other side of maintenance to me that like is worrisome, is I could still lose data. Like I still do have a backup. I can restore my identity, right? It's in my 1Password, but like there is a series of events where I would lose everything here.
I think I've learned simplicity though. Like,
how so?
I think like I've really fell back in love with like just writing and finding people's websites and RSS feeds. Like, to be honest, like I feel like half of my old Facebook I wish we could lose. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, and I feel like there's a lot of times where like, I don't know, take what you need with you, like take your writing, or like, I mean, you can put a blog on GitHub and, copy it on a website, and just being simple and just, I don't know, like, I think a lot of what you say and write and all of that like precedes you,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we don't have to do like so many extra things, like just keeping it simple with a regular website and hosting it and backing it up and just kind of like learning out loud in a way.
And that's still the number one thing that I wish that Blue Sky would do, was allow me to hide likes and reposts on my own posts and other people's posts, because like those are things that like it just drives a different incentive of, I want to be on this platform for various things, and it drives that engagement bait of, look at all the, in plenty of other social media sites have faked those things, or like Facebook had a huge lawsuit where they were like lying to people about how many views their videos got, and they lost the lawsuit. Like, yeah, we lied. It was us the whole time. We were just lying to get engagements. And I think that is something that, those are the kinds of things that I wish, like, I want this to exist. I want it to exist longer term, and I want it to be healthier for people to not care about driving someone else's business value going up, but just like worry about your own community and your own self.
But I kind of like reposts though. I think they're fun.
No, I'm fine having them. I just don't want to see the number. right? Like just the number alone of when I look at my post and I say, oh, cool, that one got 10 likes. Like that must have been a good one, right? Like I'm on fire now. It's just like, hey, you can leave the buttons there, but I don't want a number next to it. I want to just hide that completely. So it's just like, I can still do it and I can still engage with things that I like, but I don't need any peer pressure of like, wow, this thing got like 3,000 likes. Like, is that something that I like too? I don't know, probably. And I'll just click it, right?
What do you think, Dan?
I don't know. I mean, I like my perspective on this is that it's really apt to application developers. And the thing that a Proto does that is novel is that anyone can be an application developer for an existing app, right? Like you can fork a product with all of its users in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like Eurosky, they're working on their own fork of the Blue Sky app. I think currently it uses the Blue Sky server, so it's kind of like, just a reskin, like it's just a client. But like in theory, they could also fork the server, like Black Sky did. Like Black Sky actually has their own server. Like it's not even a fork. Like they actually
Yeah.
like wrote it, and it's
It's
like a
in
different
Rust,
code
right?
base.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so you can kind of fork products, right? Like that's the new thing. And so if you go to Eurosky and tell them, maybe like because they made their client is called Mu that's social, I think. And you can come to them and say, oh, it would be cool if you could hide likes or comments or whatever, and maybe they'll do it. Like ultimately, like you can do it, right? You can make your own client for like Blue Sky server, or you can make your own server and it's still gonna not like in Mastodon where like you make a server, it's like a separate thing. No, like you can make a thing that ingests everyone's data and offers a different way to look at it. So there's kind of like a marketplace where people like you who want something different actually have an option to either build it or to ask somebody to build it and to vote with their feet and to start using it.
Yeah.
So that
My
is
app
like I
view
don't
could
think
hide it.
it's yeah, like I don't think it's it's like you need to pressure the Blue Sky app to be the app for everyone. It's more like now we have a way for everyone who differs enough in opinions about what the product should be to make a different product that still works with the same network.
And you know what's cool about that? If you have a different way that you want to consume those things and you're on two different apps, because the data can pick up maybe those two people can still interact, but in ways that make them kind of like find that joy. The people that want to know their engagement, but the people that don't want to know their engagement, but you can still access the same information and create community.
Yeah, and there's actually an example. There's an app called Anisota. I think it's like a moth. It's the name of the moth. But there's an app called Anisota that is a Blue Sky client that is kind of a very weird client where I think it actually doesn't. I don't know if it shows metrics. Maybe it doesn't. Like it presents instead of a scroll, it's like it presents posts as cards. You have like stamina that you spend by looking at them or something like this. Like I don't remember the whole system, but I think it's a good example of presenting the same information in a different way. And I think Anisota even has Anisota only posts. So posts that they would not appear on Blue Sky, but Blue Sky posts do appear in Anisota. So it's kind of like this multiverse of products where like data can bleed between products and it's up to the developers to kind of decide how that works.
I really like that because like sometimes like all your friends will leave Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and then you have to be on all of these different places to try to like see different friends, even though maybe one might not be great for your mental health or maybe it's something you don't want to consume. I love the idea of being able to pick what's good for you, but still like find the people where they're at, and find people that have that same interest or you want to catch up with, I don't know, your friend from like the second grade, but being able to know what you're exposing yourself to and kind of like what works for you.
All right, my real last question now. Do you remember, Dan, what's it called? OpenID. Right, like OpenID was the spec that we had back in the day that would allow us to like get away from Google and Facebook as our identity provider, and it was a portable identity. If anyone else is familiar with that, why do you think that failed versus what Blue Sky's doing with identity?
So this was a bit before I understood what the internet is. So I think I don't actually have like a clear idea. Maybe does that build on OAuth or was that before OAuth?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
I just remember I implemented it on my WordPress. Was like, cool, like I will never need a new identity.
Because I think like a part of it is that you maybe had to run some software on your own site. Like does it require you to do yeah.
At
So
minimum, you had to have some files in place, but I think there had to be like some process there. I mean, similar to like a PDS, right? Like, because I just signed into Anasoda, which hit my PDS, right? I have to have a server running somewhere that knows my identity to say, yeah, you can
Yeah,
go through
but
this
it's a bit
auth
different though, because in Prado, identity is one layer above the data, right? It's like identity is like the thing that is the most decoupled from everything, right? Like it's persistent, but you can change, you can change where your hosting is. So identity is like one layer above all of that. Like it doesn't depend on your PDS. So you
I
don't need
also
to have a,
Wait a minute. But
like a
if
custom PDS.
My PDS, I can't log into Blue Sky if my PDS is down. I guess Blue Sky specifically would require that.
Right, but your identity is essentially a JSON document that says where your hosting is. So if your hosting is just completely down, you can redirect it to another hosting. So identity is like one layer. It doesn't live inside of your hosting. It's like a thing that has a pointer to your hosting, and that's actually what makes what makes it possible to change your hosting over time, because your hosting doesn't really own your identity. It's like what the identity points at.
I could have a layer of authentication or identity in front of my PDS or separate from my PDS.
No, so the PDS is like the implementation, right? Like it's like the thing that you log into. But which PDS like you have identity, which is your ID, and your JSON that says which PDS is currently serving you. And so if your PDS is like you're unhappy with it, you can point your identity at another PDS. And then now this PDS will be the thing that you log
Mm-hmm.
into. Right? So it's just identity is just like a pointer that you can
Right.
change over
The
time.
redirect for where to go to find it.
but
Yeah,
also
yeah.
I don't think this is purely technical. I think it's also like the environment in which Blue Sky was like birthed from, right? Like I think Elon did a lot to make people like they had a whole Elon effect, and like look at how many people like joined Blue Sky when he got rid of Brazil. Like I'm not saying that Blue Sky is only successful because of Twitter, but I think a lot of mistrust with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and just a lot of what people were experiencing sold them on app protocol or just something different, anything different, you know? It's great motivation to learn something new and to get out of your comfort zone when people are just ready to throw the whole thing away.
Yeah, it's very nuanced, I think, because it's you really can't like we don't have like an alternative timeline to compare to, and I think it's such a um there's just so many contradictions here that in some way I think in some way Elon did kind of create a lot of incentives for people to push people towards open social solutions, right? Like these like open protocols just by kind of showing by example what can go wrong, right? So in a sense, he kind of actually put a lot of enthusiasm into this movement by kind of opposing it. But on the other hand, he also like if not like if that didn't happen, then like originally Prado was not supposed to be, it was not like there was no blue sky, right? Originally Prado was a proof of concept of moving Twitter itself into open web, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
was that was kind of the idea. And so it would be Twitter that would have been on Eth Prado had he not intervened, right? Which is like such a different future because then it's a mainstream, like it's an already mainstream product built on it. But then the question is like, would incentives really line up, right? Because like Jay was insistent on doing it as a separate company so that Twitter doesn't really have control over it. And like she ended up being right, that was the right choice. And so it's like like what is the pressure that Elon created by being Elon, like has it kind of propelled the protocol into the spotlight or has it hurt it by making it like a fringe thing that only people who are like unhappy with Elon go to? And I think there's like a second order kind of effect there that if you look at the kind of people that went to, I mean, sure, it's like broad strokes, but it's mostly people who are unhappy for some reason. So it actually created this like negative, this like perception of like blue skies full of negative people who are like angry about everything and so on, because it's just the most critical segment of the mainstream platforms that has moved there. And so I think that in a sense that actually hurt the protocol because that created this like cloud over blue sky of like, oh, blue sky is just like angry lefty people or something like this. And then it's actually, and like a lot of them, in a sense, it's the success of the protocol that a lot of them don't care about the protocol, right? Like a lot of people say, I don't care about this protocol bullshit. Like I'm just, I just want Twitter with better moderation and so on. And it is it is a success of the protocol that people who don't care about the protocol actually end up kind of using it without knowing it. But it also kind of hurts it because it means that there is no, it doesn't create like momentum around the protocol itself. So it's such a bowl of contradictions, I think. It's very hard to say like how things could have turned out.
I think App Protocol has the same issue as SREs do. Like when it's doing its job, you don't know it's doing it great.
Exactly.
So
No,
it's
Exactly.
like because it's been so good, like it's meant to be invisible, but also I think
Yes.
a lot of like, so I think for a long time it was that negativity of people that didn't like Twitter, but I wonder also if like, like there's a lot of discussion in how people are, data is being harvested. It's a lot of discussion into like flock cameras and like just
Hmm.
all of these kind of like data and like living in a like security state and how people are using your data. And I think the more that mistrust grows, the more people are looking for other alternatives, and whether that be App Protocol or anything. But I do think we're in a point where, and even just look at the laws that people are making in data sovereignty, or just the way that like the government got involved with TikTok. Like I think we're in a stage where like our laws are not keeping up with it, and people are really starting to be more and more concerned and realizing how like technology works and if they want to be a part of like technology. So I think that so much is changing that I wonder if the focus on data and what we use and how we consume will benefit like the protocol in general, not just Blue Sky, but just finding different ways to interact with the world that you feel comfortable with.
I
And
think
with all, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I think like the contradiction there is that at Prado like is very kind of scraper first mentality, where it's actually like if it's public, it's equally public to everyone, right? Like that is the stance, which I think is kind of opposite from how a lot of people, this like your data is private. It's more like it's not, one company is not special, it's not special because you post into it. So I think that is maybe like a difference, but they're also working on extending the protocol for permissioned data.
Yeah.
So for things that are, private, only the apps that you give access to see it, and only like, the scope that you kind of give access. So I think that is an exciting kind of development that they're trying to finish like this year. So we'll see if that is also like another, it's like another blocker to adoption, is that you can't do permission data on the protocol, and we'll see what happens when you can.
I think even though like the protocol is like public things being public, I think it's just the fact that people are more interested in learning about what's public, what's not public, and all of that. And then the
Hmm.
fact that the protocol is like so is taking so many like contributions and it's willing to bend and kind of listen to what people want makes it like a good possibility.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about all that with us. If you want to follow Dan on Blue Sky, the FAFO.FM account, which we do have the domain as our handle, has a starter pack of all of the guests we've had on the show. And Dan, I just added you, so you're in there now too. So anyone that is coming to Blue Sky for the first time, you can sign up for the starter pack that's in the show notes, and you will get everyone that has been on the show, or everyone that has been on the show that has a Blue Sky account, which is not everyone, unfortunately. And then, yeah, you can go from there, follow people, and start owning your own PDS. I do have some videos on my personal YouTube on like how to run a PDS. I was running it on a Raspberry Pi at my house for a little while, and I learned just how unreliable my uplink net connection was, and so I moved that to a hosting provider. But the rules still apply, and if you want to migrate to a PDS, I also have a video for that. I'll throw that in the show notes just because I think it's fascinating. I do think that more people should own their data no matter what they're doing, whether the network is billionaire proof or not. Just having a backup and being able to say this is my data and I can move it around wherever I want, I think is important, and that's something that I like to promote.
And I also think that App Protocol is one of the few things that feel accessible, that people can try something like that for the first time. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but it's such a cool project and something to like try.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone for listening to the show, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fork Around and Find Out. If you like this show, please consider sharing it with a friend, a coworker, a family member, or even an enemy. However we get the word out about this show helps it to become sustainable for the long term. If you want to sponsor this show, please go to FAFO.FM/sponsor and reach out to us there about what you're interested in sponsoring and how we can help. We hope your systems stay available and your pagers stay quiet. We'll see you again next time.